There's a point in life when you stop asking, "What do I want to do?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming?" It happens quietly, somewhere between chasing goals and realizing that the goals never stop. You reach one, then another, and the satisfaction fades quicker each time. It's not because the goals were wrong. It's because you've been chasing movement, not meaning. We live in a world that worships progress. We're told to always be improving, optimizing, growing, and if we're not moving forward, we must be falling behind. But here's the thing, forward isn't always the same as deeper. You can go very far and still feel empty because the direction was never inward. So what if peace isn't something you get after you've achieved enough? What if peace is what happens when you stop trying to prove you're enough? When you start to slow down, really slow down, you begin to notice something strange. The world keeps spinning, deadlines keep coming, everyone else seems to be racing, but somehow you feel calmer. You stop trying to catch up and start realizing that maybe there's nowhere to catch up to. See, most of us were taught that peace is a reward, something we earn once we've fixed every problem. But peace doesn't wait for perfection. It begins the moment you accept imperfection. You can't fight your way to peace. You can only relax your way into it. That's hard to hear when you're used to grinding. When your identity is built around doing, resting can feel like failure. Slowing down feels like you're wasting time. But the truth is, if you don't stop, life will stop you. With exhaustion, burnout, or that quiet feeling of something's missing. And when that moment comes, it's not a crisis. It's an invitation to ask, what am I really doing all this for? Who am I doing it for? And what would my life look like if it wasn't built around proving my worth? You might realize that so much of what you thought you wanted, the titles, the milestones, the validation, were really just ways to feel safe, seen, and loved. And the wild thing is, those feelings were never outside you. They were waiting underneath the noise, the same way the sky is always behind the clouds. You've just been too busy surviving to notice it. We talk a lot about success, finding your niche, building momentum, creating your dream life, but we rarely talk about alignment, that quiet click inside you when what you're doing matches who you are. Alignment doesn't always look impressive. Sometimes it looks like saying no to something that pays well, just because it doesn't feel right. Sometimes it looks like resting instead of hustling. Sometimes it looks like being brave enough to stop climbing a ladder that leads somewhere you don't even want to go. That's not laziness. That's wisdom. But alignment takes honesty, and honesty can be uncomfortable. Because to live truthfully, you have to admit what's not working. You have to look at the parts of your life that feel off and ask why you keep holding on to them. Sometimes you stay because it's familiar, not because it's right. Sometimes you call it stability, but it's really fear in disguise. And when you finally get honest with yourself, there's a kind of silence that follows, the silence between who you were and who you're becoming. It can feel lonely, but it's also sacred. It's the space where transformation begins. That silence is where you meet yourself again. Not the version that performs for approval, or the one that lives for the algorithm, or the one that keeps saying, "I'm fine," when you're not. The real you, the one that existed before the world told you who you had to be. That version of you has been waiting patiently. It never went away. It's just been buried under noise, the notifications, the expectations, the need to always be doing more. But once you start listening again, once you start slowing down, you'll hear it. A quiet, calm voice that says, "Hey, I'm still here. I've been here all along." And that's where peace starts. Not with fixing your life, but with remembering yourself. Because here's the truth. You can change jobs, cities, relationships, habits. But if you don't come home to yourself, you'll keep recreating the same patterns, just in new places. Peace doesn't come from rearranging the outside. It comes from being at home on the inside. When you're at peace, life doesn't suddenly become easy. You still have stress, responsibilities, uncertainty, but something shifts. You stop fighting the waves and start floating with them. You start trusting that you can handle whatever comes, not because you control it, but because you're grounded in who you are. And maybe that's what maturity really is, not knowing more, not doing more, but needing less. Less validation, less drama, less noise, more space to breathe, more time to feel, more room to just exist. Because when you strip away everything that doesn't matter, what's left isn't emptiness, it's clarity. And clarity is powerful. It doesn't always tell you what to do next, but it always shows you what no longer fits. When you reach that point, you stop trying to force your life to look a certain way. You start letting it unfold. You stop gripping and you start trusting. You start realizing that maybe the universe isn't testing you. Maybe it's guiding you. Maybe all the detours weren't mistakes. They were redirections. And slowly, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That shift from resistance to curiosity changes everything. Because now, life isn't something that's happening to you. It's something that's happening with you. And that's when peace stops being a destination. It becomes a way of living. When you start living that way with curiosity instead of control, something inside you softens. You no longer carry the weight of needing everything to go exactly as planned. You stop trying to predict every outcome. You stop needing people to behave a certain way just to keep your peace. You begin to understand that peace isn't built on perfect conditions. It's built on trust. Trust that you can handle life as it comes. Trust that timing has its own intelligence. Trust that what's meant for you won't miss you, not because you deserve it, but because you're aligned with it. And the more you trust, the lighter you feel. Because the opposite of trust isn't doubt, it's control. And control is heavy. You start to notice that most of your stress wasn't about what was happening. It was about trying to make things happen differently. You were fighting life, not living it. But when you start to let go, something amazing happens. The moment you stop forcing, things begin to flow. It's like life was waiting for you to relax before it could move again. See, energy moves through openness. When you cling, you block it. When you resist, you trap it. But when you relax, when you breathe, you make space for life to surprise you. And that's the beauty of peace. It doesn't make your world smaller. It makes it bigger. Because now you're not afraid to feel things fully. You're not afraid of uncertainty. You're not afraid to be real. And that brings us to something most people forget. Being real isn't always comfortable, but it's always peaceful. We spend so much time pretending to be fine, pretending to have it together, pretending we're not scared or tired or lost. But pretending costs energy. It's like running with a mask that gets heavier the longer you wear it. Eventually, you just get tired of the act, tired of trying to live up to an image that doesn't even make you happy. That's when authenticity becomes not just a value, but a necessity. Because there's a kind of exhaustion that rest can't fix, the exhaustion of not being yourself. When you start being honest, really honest, life gets simpler. Not easier, but simpler. Because truth doesn't have to be remembered. You don't have to keep track of what you said, who you were trying to be. You just show up as you are. And something incredible happens when you do that. People start recognizing you, not the version you've been performing, but the real one. The one that laughs too loud. The one that's awkward sometimes. The one that feels deeply. That's the version of you the world actually needs. Because real always resonates deeper than perfect. It's funny, we spend our lives chasing success, thinking it's the path to freedom. But real freedom doesn't come from success. It comes from authenticity. Because you can't be free while pretending. You can't be free while trying to please everyone. You can't be free while living someone else's version of your life. Freedom comes when you finally decide that peace matters more than approval. And yes, that decision will cost you something. You'll lose people who liked the version of you that always said yes. You'll lose situations that fed your ego but drained your soul. You'll lose the comfort of fitting in. But what you gain is yourself, and once you have that, nothing else compares. When you start choosing peace over performance, you'll realize something powerful. The world doesn't fall apart when you stop pretending. It just gets quieter. And in that quiet, you can finally hear your own voice again. At first, that silence feels uncomfortable. Because you're used to noise, the constant hum of busyness, the pressure of always being on. Silence forces you to face what's underneath all that. Your thoughts, your fears, your unmet needs. But here's the truth. Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. You just have to be brave enough to sit in it. When you give yourself permission to slow down, to just be, you start to see what's really going on inside you. You notice the stories you've been telling yourself. Stories about not being enough, about needing to do more, be more, have more. You realize that those stories aren't facts. They're just habits of thought. And once you see them, you can question them. You can ask, who told me that? Is it true? What if I stopped believing it? That's where inner peace begins. Not by changing your external world, but by changing your relationship with your internal one. You start to see that most of your suffering didn't come from what was happening. It came from what you thought about what was happening. Came from resistance, from the idea that this shouldn't be happening. But what if it should? What if every uncomfortable moment is actually life trying to evolve you, trying to grow something new in you that couldn't exist without friction? You stop asking life to be easy, and you start asking to be strong. You stop asking for comfort, and you start asking for clarity. And clarity comes through contrast, through the moments that challenge you, confuse you, and stretch you. So when life gets hard, instead of collapsing into, why me? You start leaning into, okay, what now? That shift from victimhood to awareness is where true peace lives. Because now, you're no longer waiting for life to fix itself before you can feel okay. You're learning how to be okay while life unfolds. That's emotional maturity, and it's something most people spend a lifetime avoiding because it requires responsibility. It's easier to blame than to observe. It's easier to escape than to sit still. It's easier to distract than to feel. But peace doesn't live in distraction. It lives in awareness. Awareness that every emotion is a teacher. Every challenge is feedback. Every pause is an invitation. And when you start living from that awareness, you stop chasing highs and start appreciating stillness. You realize that the most peaceful people aren't the ones who have perfect lives. They're the ones who stopped needing perfect conditions to feel peaceful. They learned how to be still in the storm, not because they ignore the rain, but because they trust the roots they've built. That's what all this is really about, not becoming untouchable, but becoming grounded. Because life will always move. There will always be uncertainty, change, loss, and chaos. But peace isn't about controlling the weather. It's about learning how to stand steady in it. When you live from that place, even challenges start to feel different. You stop labeling them as bad or good. You start seeing them as neutral events that carry meaning, depending on how you meet them. You meet them with curiosity, not panic, with openness, not defense. And the funny thing is, when you stop resisting them, they stop hurting as much. Because pain plus resistance equals suffering. But pain plus acceptance equals growth. You can't avoid pain. It's part of being alive. But you can choose not to multiply it with resistance. So the next time something goes wrong, take a breath. Don't rush to fix it. Don't spiral into this shouldn't be happening. Ask yourself, can I just be with this for a moment? Because the moment you stop running from discomfort, it loses its power over you. That's not giving up, that's mastery. Mastery doesn't mean you control life. It means you understand it. And once you understand that life isn't supposed to be controlled, it's supposed to be experienced, peace stops being fragile. It becomes your natural state. There's a point where you stop searching for peace and start realizing it was never lost. It's been underneath the noise the whole time. Quiet, patient, waiting for you to notice it. But we live in a culture that glorifies noise. Everyone's talking, everyone's posting, everyone's branding themselves, even when they don't know who they are yet. The pressure to be someone never stops. And maybe that's the problem. We're so busy creating versions of ourselves that we forget to be ourselves. We build digital identities, personal brands, online niches, and there's nothing wrong with that. Building a niche can be powerful. It's how you find your people. It's how you turn your passion into purpose. But the danger is when your niche becomes a cage, when your identity gets trapped inside a label. You start to feel like you can't grow, can't change, can't be messy or uncertain, because people expect you to stay consistent. You think, if I evolve, will I lose them? But here's the truth. The right people don't love you for your consistency. They love you for your authenticity. Your niche doesn't have to define you forever. It can evolve with you. It should evolve with you. Because if your work is an honest reflection of who you are, and you're always growing, then of course your work will change too. That's not inconsistency, that's evolution. And evolution is what keeps your soul alive. See, peace doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you stop forcing your growth. You stop measuring it against others. You stop needing to announce it. You just live it. You learn to outgrow quietly. And that's something most people don't understand. Growth doesn't always look loud. It doesn't always look like new projects or big moves. Sometimes growth looks like saying less, posting less, sitting in stillness while everything in you rearranges. Sometimes it looks like rest, because real growth is integration. It's not just what you learn, it's how you embody what you've learned. It's easy to collect insights. It's harder to live them. And that's why peace often feels boring at first, because your nervous system is used to chaos. It's used to stimulation, to constantly checking, scrolling, reacting. So when things finally get quiet, it mistakes calm for emptiness. But stillness isn't emptiness. It's space. Space for clarity. Space for truth. Space for life to move at its own pace again. And when you give yourself that space, you begin to see everything differently. You notice how much of your life was driven by urgency, the rush to get somewhere, to become someone, to fix something that maybe wasn't even broken. You realize that most of the pressure you feel isn't coming from the world. It's coming from you. The expectations, the comparisons, the endless internal checklist, they were never real. They were just noise. And when you finally stop listening to that noise, peace isn't something you chase. It's what's left when the chasing stops. That's why awareness is the first step to peace. You can't change what you don't see. But once you start seeing the patterns, the constant need for approval, the fear of being behind, the anxiety that tells you you're never doing enough, you gain the power to pause. And that pause is sacred, because every time you pause, you interrupt the pattern. You remind your mind that urgency isn't the same as importance. You remind your heart that you're safe even when things aren't perfect. Peace isn't a moment you reach. It's a muscle you build, one breath, one pause, one honest moment at a time. And like any muscle, it gets stronger with practice. First, you'll forget. You'll fall back into old patterns, scrolling when you feel anxious, working when you should be resting, saying yes when you mean no. That's okay. Awareness doesn't mean perfection. It means you notice sooner. You catch yourself mid-pattern and choose differently. You take a breath instead of reacting. You respond instead of rushing. And little by little, that becomes your new normal. You start to build a new kind of strength, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't shout or prove. The kind that doesn't need validation to feel real. And when you start living like that, people notice, not because you're louder, but because your energy is calmer. There's something magnetic about peace. It doesn't chase. It attracts. It doesn't demand. It allows. That's why some of the most peaceful people you'll ever meet are also the most powerful, because they've mastered their inner world. They've stopped fighting everything outside them. They've learned that control is an illusion, but calm is a choice. And when you finally understand that, you stop trying to fix everything and start learning how to flow with it. That's what presence really is. Not being perfectly mindful all the time, but being available for the moment you're in. You stop missing your life because you're too busy thinking about your life. You start tasting your food, feeling your breath, listening when someone speaks instead of planning what to say next. You begin to realize that peace isn't found in future goals. It's found in how deeply you live this moment, because this moment is all you ever truly have. And once you stop taking it for granted, you start to see how full it actually is. Even the small things, the sunlight on your face, the sound of rain, the way your heart beats without you telling it to, start to feel miraculous again. You begin to remember what it's like to be alive, not just busy. And that's what peace gives you back. Aliveness. Because being busy and being alive are not the same thing. One drains you, the other fills you. When you're busy, you're always reaching for the next thing. When you're alive, you're present for the thing in front of you. Peace brings you back to presence. Presence brings you back to aliveness. And aliveness, that's what your soul has been craving all along. Not another achievement, not another follower, not another plan, just the simple, grounded joy of being here, now as you are. That's the quiet revolution. Not escaping your life, but actually being in it. Because the world doesn't need more people who are successful but disconnected. It needs people who are awake, present, whole. And when you live like that, you naturally begin to inspire others, not because you're trying to, but because peace is contagious. It shifts the energy in every room you walk into. You become a reminder that it's possible to live differently, to be both ambitious and peaceful, driven and grounded, productive and present. You stop being proof of hustle culture and start being proof of harmony. And that's what the world needs right now. Not more noise, but more calm. Not more people who can do everything, but more people who know how to be with everything. Because peace doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care differently. You care without attachment. You love without control. You give without losing yourself. That's the kind of peace that lasts. When you start living from that space, that grounded, peaceful awareness, something subtle but profound happens. You stop reacting and you start responding. You stop rushing through moments just to reach the next one. You begin to live with intention instead of momentum. And intention changes everything. Because intention brings consciousness into the parts of your life that used to run on autopilot. You start noticing the small choices that shape your reality. The tone you use when you speak, the thoughts you entertain, the energy you carry into a room. You realize that peace isn't about escaping the world. It's about how you move through it. You can still be ambitious. You can still chase dreams. You can still work hard and build your niche and want more out of life, but you'll be doing it from a place of alignment, not anxiety. From wholeness, not from the fear of not being enough. And that's when your work becomes art again. Because now it's not driven by desperation. It's driven by purpose. That's the shift from forcing to flowing. And you can feel the difference. Forcing feels like tension, like your whole body is braced against the world. Flowing feels like breath, like life is moving with you, not against you. You're still putting in effort, but it's clean effort. You're not carrying resistance with every step. And what's wild is, when you stop fighting the current, you often get where you're going faster. Not because you're pushing harder, but because you're finally in sync with the direction life wants to take you. That's the paradox of peace. The less you try to control everything, the more things start to align naturally. Because control is rooted in fear, but peace is rooted in trust. And when you trust, you start to see patterns you couldn't before. You start noticing how everything connects. How even your mistakes were guiding you, how even your delays were protecting you. You realize that maybe life was never punishing you, it was preparing you, and that realization changes the way you carry yourself. You walk lighter, you speak softer, you don't panic as easily when plans shift, because you've stopped needing life to go your way in order to feel okay. You've learned how to stay steady even when things get messy. That steadiness doesn't come from pretending everything's fine. It comes from knowing that even when things aren't fine, you still are. You stop identifying with your circumstances. You stop saying, "I am my problems." Instead, you start seeing them as experiences passing through your awareness. You are not your thoughts. You are not your anxiety. You are not your failures. You are the awareness noticing all of it. And when you start identifying with that awareness instead of the chaos, life loses a lot of its power to shake you. That's what spiritual maturity feels like. Not detachment in a cold way, but presence with perspective. You still feel everything, but you don't drown in it. You still care deeply, but you don't collapse when things don't go your way. You start to understand that peace and pain can coexist, that it's possible to feel sadness without losing your grounding, to experience disappointment without losing your direction. Peace doesn't mean nothing hurts. It means you don't have to fight the hurt anymore. You let it move through you, like a wave that rises and falls. You let it teach you what it needs to teach you, and then you let it go. And every time you do that, you get a little freer. You realize that freedom isn't about getting rid of emotions. It's about learning how to feel them without fear. Because emotions are just information. They're messengers, not enemies. Anger shows you where your boundaries are being crossed. Fear shows you where you've stopped trusting. Sadness shows you what needs to be released. When you stop judging those emotions and start listening to them, they lose their grip on you. You stop trying to fix yourself because you finally understand there was never anything wrong with you. You were just taught to disconnect, to silence your feelings, to stay busy, to always be fine. But peace brings you home to your humanity. It reconnects you with the parts of yourself that the world told you to suppress. And when you start honoring those parts, your sensitivity, your vulnerability, your quiet truth, you start to feel whole again. Wholeness isn't about being perfect. It's about being complete, about embracing all the parts of you, even the messy, uncertain, still healing ones. That's why peace and self-acceptance are inseparable. Because you can't be at peace with life while being at war with yourself. The more you forgive yourself for not knowing better, for staying too long, for being human, the lighter you become. And that lightness changes your energy. It changes how you show up for others. Because the more compassion you have for yourself, the more compassion you naturally have for everyone else. You stop needing to judge, to criticize, to compete. You start seeing that everyone's just trying to find peace in their own way too. Even the people who hurt you, even the ones who don't understand you. You realize that most people act from pain, not malice. That everyone's fighting an invisible battle, carrying silent stories you'll never fully know. And that awareness doesn't mean you excuse bad behavior, it means you stop taking it personally. You set boundaries, but you do it without bitterness. You forgive, but you still protect your peace. That's emotional balance. And it's powerful because it frees up so much energy. All that mental space you used to spend on resentment, on trying to change people, on replaying old stories, it becomes available again. And you can use that energy for something beautiful, to create, to connect, to live. Because when your heart isn't clogged with old pain, inspiration starts flowing again. You get new ideas. You see possibilities where you used to see problems. You start moving with ease. You're not chasing fulfillment anymore, you're living it. And that's when your outer world starts to reflect your inner one. You start attracting experiences and people that match your calm, not your chaos. Not because of some magic trick, but because energy is reciprocal. The more peace you embody, the more peace your life starts to mirror. And maybe that's the real manifestation nobody talks about. It's not just visualizing what you want, it's becoming the kind of person who can hold it. Because peace doesn't attract chaos. Wholeness doesn't attract lack. The more aligned you are, the less you need to chase. And the less you chase, the more you naturally draw in what's right for you. When you start living from that place of alignment, something incredible begins to happen. Life feels lighter, but deeper. You still have responsibilities, challenges, ups and downs, but you're no longer defined by them. You start to understand that peace doesn't erase difficulty. It changes your relationship with it. You stop asking, how do I avoid pain? And start asking, how can I move through it with grace? That's the real shift, from control to cooperation, from fear to trust. And once that shift happens, you begin to see how much of your old life was driven by survival. Doing, achieving, fixing, proving. It wasn't wrong. It was just what you knew. You were doing your best with the tools you had. But peace gives you new tools. Awareness, patience, compassion, and discernment. Now, you don't react to everything that happens. You choose what deserves your energy. You start saying things like, that's not mine to carry, or this doesn't align with my peace, and you mean it. That's when you realize how powerful you've become, not in a controlling, dominating way, but in a grounded, quiet way. The kind of power that comes from self-mastery, not from manipulation. You understand that true strength isn't loud. It's calm, because anyone can stay centered when life is easy. But staying grounded when life tests you, that's real power. And that kind of peace doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from presence, from facing what's uncomfortable and staying open anyway. You start realizing that discomfort doesn't mean something's wrong. It often means you're growing. Growth and peace aren't opposites. They're partners. Peace gives you the stability to handle growth, and growth deepens your peace. That's why you can be both peaceful and passionate, both grounded and ambitious. Peace isn't the absence of movement. It's the foundation that allows movement to happen without chaos. And that changes the way you approach your goals. You stop setting goals just to escape the present. You start setting them from a place of fullness, not lack. You don't chase success to feel worthy anymore. You create from worthiness. You build from alignment. You take action, but your actions come from joy, not pressure. You realize that when you're at peace within yourself, you don't need to prove your value. You express it. That's when everything you do starts to feel different. Your work becomes an extension of who you are, not a distraction from who you're afraid to be. You stop competing with others because you finally understand that everyone's path unfolds in its own timing. There's no behind. There's no late. There's just you walking your own rhythm. And once you stop comparing, you start appreciating. You appreciate your pace. You appreciate your process. You even start to appreciate your past, because you can finally see how every moment was leading you here. All the detours, all the heartbreaks, all the times you thought you failed, they were teaching you how to come home to yourself. You realized that peace was never something you had to earn. It was always your natural state, you just had to remember it. And remembering takes time. It's not a one-time breakthrough. It's a daily practice, a gentle returning. Some days you'll forget. You'll slip into old patterns, you'll feel restless or anxious, you'll get caught up in the noise again. That's okay. That's part of the journey. The goal isn't to stay peaceful every second. The goal is to remember peace faster every time you lose it. You don't beat yourself up for forgetting. You simply return. You take a breath, soften your shoulders, and remind yourself, I can start again. And that willingness to start again is peace. Because peace isn't perfection. It's permission. Permission to be human, to fall and get back up, to not have it all figured out. You realize that peace isn't a destination at the end of your healing. It's the energy that carries you through it. And the more you live in that energy, the more everything begins to realign naturally. Your relationships start to shift too. You stop needing people to fill your emptiness because you're no longer empty. You stop chasing validation because you've already validated yourself. You start relating from wholeness, not from wounds. You stop trying to fix people, save people, or convince them to change. You understand that everyone's on their own timeline, and peace comes from letting them walk it. You love them without needing to control them. You let people be who they are, even when that means they can't stay. And yes, sometimes that hurts, but it's a clean kind of hurt, a truthful kind, because you're not abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable anymore. That's the deepest peace of all, knowing you can be true to yourself and still be kind, you can walk away with love, and you can forgive without returning. That's when boundaries stop feeling like walls and start feeling like doors. You're not shutting people out. You're simply choosing what enters your space. And when your space is filled with peace, you become selective, not out of fear, but out of respect. You start curating your life like a sacred place. The people you keep close, the content you consume, the energy you allow. All of it matters because everything you interact with shapes your inner state. And when peace becomes your priority, you start protecting it the way you once protected your pride. You realize that not every opinion needs a response. Not every invitation deserves a yes. Not every battle is worth fighting. That's not detachment. That's wisdom. You're no longer reacting from ego. You're responding from awareness. And that awareness turns your life into something softer, quieter, but so much richer. You begin to realize that peace doesn't mean smallness. It doesn't mean giving up ambition. It means moving through life with clarity and calm. It means doing what you love without letting the noise of the world distort it. It means being in the world, but not consumed by it. And once you start living that way, you can feel it in your body, in your breath, in the way you move through each day. You wake up differently. You don't dread the day ahead. You don't rush to check your phone. You take a moment to feel your own presence before the world pulls at it. You drink your coffee slowly. You breathe. You notice. And somehow, that simple awareness turns ordinary mornings into sacred moments. Because peace isn't found in big, dramatic changes. It's found in those tiny, intentional pauses, the moments when you decide to live instead of rush. The truth is, peace doesn't arrive when life calms down. It arrives when you do. When you reach that kind of peace, the kind that lives inside you, not around you, something subtle but powerful shifts in how you see the world. You stop rushing to get there because you realize there's no there. There's only here. And the more you sink into here, the more life begins to reveal its richness. You start noticing how alive everything actually is, how the trees sway for no reason, how strangers smile for a moment and then disappear into their own stories, how time moves differently when you're fully present. It's not that life becomes easier, it just becomes clearer. You understand that everything has its rhythm, expansion and contraction, growth and rest, movement and stillness, and you stop fighting those cycles. You begin to trust them. When life slows down, you no longer panic. You don't rush to fill the silence. You know that stillness is where integration happens, where lessons sink in, where new ideas start to grow. You realize that maybe not every season is meant to be productive. Some seasons are meant to be peaceful. Some are meant to heal you quietly while nothing visible seems to be happening. And that's okay, because peace teaches you patience. Not just the kind of patience that waits for things to change, but the kind that's content even while they don't. You start to understand that real peace is not fragile. It doesn't disappear when life gets messy. It expands to hold the mess. It's like an ocean, the waves might crash on the surface, but the depth stays still. That's you now. You've become deeper. You still feel, you still care, you still dream, but you're anchored. You don't get swept away by every wave of emotion or opinion. You move with intention, and because of that, your presence starts to affect people around you. You'll notice it in small ways. Someone will tell you they feel calm around you. Someone will open up because they sense you're not judging them. Someone will say, "You just have this peaceful energy." That's when you realize your inner work was never just for you, because peace is contagious. Your calm becomes a mirror that reminds others of their own stillness. Your patience gives permission for others to slow down. Your groundedness creates safety. That's what true influence is, not making people follow you, but helping them return to themselves. And you'll start to see that maybe that's been your real purpose all along. Not to impress, not to accumulate, not to prove, but to embody peace so deeply that it ripples outward. Because every peaceful person is like a candle, one light that can ignite many others. You don't even have to try. You just have to be. That's the most powerful kind of teaching, the kind that comes from embodiment, not instruction. And maybe that's what the world needs right now. Not louder voices, but calmer hearts. People who can hold space instead of taking it. People who can listen without fixing. People who can live with gentleness in a world addicted to urgency. That's what peace prepares you for: leadership without ego, success without anxiety, love without fear. It doesn't mean you never get triggered or upset again. You will. You're human, but you won't lose yourself in it anymore. You'll catch yourself mid-reaction. Take a breath and remember that you have a choice. And that's freedom, not from emotion, but within emotion. You start seeing life as something you participate in, not something you need to control. You flow with what comes. You adjust. You learn. You release. You realize that peace isn't the end of the journey. It's the way you travel. And once you live that way, everything changes, not because the world suddenly becomes perfect, but because you stop needing it to be. You're no longer looking for meaning. You're creating it. You're no longer chasing happiness. You're living with contentment. And in that space, happiness comes and goes, but peace stays. Because peace is the ground beneath it all. It's the space between every inhale and exhale. It's the pause between every thought. It's the presence that's always been here, quietly waiting for you to come home. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to chase it. You just have to stop running from it. And when you do, when you finally sit down, take a deep breath, and let the world spin without you for a second, you realize something beautiful. You were never lost. You were just loud. Peace was never gone. You just couldn't hear it over the noise. But it's still here. It's always been here. And now that you've slowed down enough to listen, you can finally feel it again. And maybe that's the whole point. Not to escape the world, not to perfect yourself, not to figure everything out, but to return to this moment over and over until being here feels like home. Because this moment is home, and you've always belonged here. You know, the more I think about it, the more I realize that peace isn't this grand, mystical state that only certain people can reach. It's not something you have to travel the world to find or something that magically appears when your life finally makes sense. Peace is small, it's simple, it's quiet. It's in the way you breathe when you finally stop trying to prove yourself. It's in that one deep exhale when you realize you don't have to fight everything. It's in the little moments, the still ones, that we usually rush past. Peace hides in ordinary places, in a slow morning, in a silent drive, in the few seconds before you speak when you choose kindness instead of reaction. It's not flashy, it's not loud, it's not something you post about, it's something you live. And the truth is, it takes courage to live peacefully, because peace asks you to let go of control, of grudges, of the need to be right all the time. It asks you to forgive, to trust, to soften, and that can feel vulnerable, almost like weakness at first. But it's not, because peace isn't passive. It's powerful. It takes incredible strength to stay gentle in a world that's constantly shouting. It takes awareness to stay kind when it's easier to be cynical. It takes confidence to be calm when everyone else is trying to be loud. That's what people don't tell you. That peace is a kind of rebellion. It's saying, I refuse to let the chaos of the world dictate the rhythm of my soul. It's saying, I can move through life with ease, even when life isn't easy. You start to realize that peace isn't the opposite of passion. It's the foundation of it. Because when you're grounded, your creativity flows, your focus sharpens, your energy lasts. You can show up fully without burning out. You can care deeply without losing yourself. That's the kind of peace that changes lives. Not just yours, but everyone you touch. Because when one person becomes peaceful, it ripples outward. Your presence becomes medicine. Your energy becomes healing. And the world, even if just in small ways, begins to shift. Maybe that's how it all changes, not through noise or power or domination, but through presence. Through people who choose to live differently. People who listen more than they talk. Who love more than they judge. Who create more than they complain. That's what peace does. It clears away all the noise so you can hear what truly matters. And when you live that way, you stop chasing the future so hard. You stop regretting the past so much. You start living, really living, in this exact moment, which is all you ever had anyway. You find yourself smiling for no reason. You notice how the light falls on your hands. You laugh more easily. You rest without guilt. And that's when you know you didn't find peace. You remembered it, because peace was never missing. It was just waiting for you to slow down long enough to notice it again. So maybe that's the real invitation. To stop searching so far outside yourself and start listening to what's been whispering inside all along. Peace isn't in the next chapter of your life. It's not hiding in the next goal or the next milestone. It's right here, in the stillness between your thoughts, in the quiet that follows every breath. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to deserve it. You just have to choose it. And every time you do, every time you pause, breathe, and return to that calm center within you, you're building a new kind of life. A life that doesn't run on anxiety or comparison. A life that flows. You start realizing that you can work hard without being tense. You can love deeply without clinging. And you can dream big without losing your peace. That's when life becomes beautiful again. Not perfect, not predictable, but peaceful. Because peace doesn't mean everything around you stops moving. It means you finally stop fighting yourself. You stop being at war with your own mind. You stop arguing with reality. You start trusting that what's meant for you will find you, not because you chase it, but because you're aligned with it. And in that alignment, everything feels different. You walk lighter. You speak softer. You rest deeper. You start to see that this quiet confidence, this steady heart, this calm awareness is what you were searching for all along. Not a new life, but a new way of living it. And when that realization settles in, you smile. Because, deep down, that peace was never something you had to find. It was something you were always meant to return to. So as you move forward into your next goal, your next chapter, your next challenge, take this with you. You don't have to rush. You don't have to prove. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just stay present, stay kind, stay gentle, because peace isn't a place you arrive at, it's the way you walk. And the way you walk becomes the life you build.